when it's time to put up the translucent curtain. And you're probably thinking, like, what the hell does that mean? So I'm going to just give this. This is where this analogy actually came from. When I used to live in London, I lived in an L-shaped, almost a studio apartment, and in between the space that was the living room and the bedroom, I put up literally a translucent curtain that when I had guests, it was closed. Now, everyone who came into the seating area could see that there was a bedroom there, but this translucent curtain made very clear that unless I'd opened it or asked you in there, you were not welcome into that space. And that is what I call a boundary. It's not a hard boundary, but it's one that people should understand. It is not to be crossed unless you are invited. And a lot of the times, and the reason why I talk about this is because a lot of the times when we think of boundaries, we think of, or I do at the very least, when people say, I'm going to put up my boundaries, it's always that thing in my mind of imagining a brick wall or a hedge with thorns or something that is immovable, completely immovable, and there's only maybe a door, a tiny door to let you in past it, or you have to actually break something down to get through it. Whereas for me, the idea of the translucent curtain is that boundaries can be flexible, but they should still make a clear, but they should still make a clear statement. It can be flexible, but it should still make a clear statement. Boundaries do not have to be hard and fast. They don't have to be hard and fast. You can have a boundary and there might be flexibility within that boundary. Um, and I believe that the flexibility in your boundaries, it doesn't mean that you're all of a sudden opening the curtain. It might mean that the curtain can go, back and forth. You're not opening it. It doesn't mean that someone's welcome, but it does mean that you can decide where your boundary lies without breaking your values, without breaking your boundary, without breaking the rules. Um, because I feel like we come to this concept of hard and fast. This is my hard and fast boundary, full stop. And we don't always allow ourselves to make concessions. And when we do allow somebody to go over our boundaries, we chastise ourselves when the outcome isn't what we expected, instead of giving ourselves the grace and saying, actually, boundaries can be flexible. And I'm allowed to move my boundaries as long as I still feel protected. But the clarity is somebody has to be invited in to be able to cross them. It's clear, it can be flexible, but it doesn't have to be hard and fast. And I've learned that understanding where my boundary is, or what would constitute me wanting to open that curtain? What would constitute somebody being able to go past that boundary? Is it life or death? If it's something serious. But what does flexibility in that boundary look like to me? And it doesn't have to be a moral thing. It doesn't have to be a big judgment. But the underlying concept for me is boundaries just don't always have to be fixed. We have to understand them. Because I think in the rigidity comes the breaking, and in the rigidity comes this part around A, self chastisement, but B, um, not giving ourselves the grace to look at the differing contexts under which we may need to operate in, and still maintain our boundaries. So I just want you to think about that, this translucent curtain concept, being able to see that it's a boundary, understanding that it's still a clear boundary, but it doesn't have to be rigid. It doesn't have to be rigid.